No one noticed the man with the mop at first. That was the point. The floor of ironclad Martial Arts Academy, tucked inside an old brick warehouse in Tacoma, Washington, gleamed under fluorescent lights. Sweat-darkened mats, the thud of bare feet, the sharp snap of gloves, everything screamed discipline and hierarchy. Everything except Ethan Cole. He moved quietly along the edge of the room, gray maintenance uniform loose on his frame, pushing a mop with slow, methodical strokes. He'd been hired 3 weeks ago. Night shifts, clean up after classes, no eye contact, no questions until tonight. "Hey, mop guy." The voice cracked through the dojo like a whip. Instructor Brandon Knox, 35, loud confidence stitched into every movement, adjusted the black belt around his waist. His students laughed on cue. "Why don't you come up here?" Brandon smirked. "Give us a little entertainment." Ethan paused. Slowly, he lifted his eyes. "I don't want to interrupt, sir," Ethan said calmly. "I'll be out of your way in a minute." That should have been the end of it. Brandon laughed harder. "Did you hear that?" he told the class. "He called me sir. That's respect, people, something you earn." 8 students chuckled, a few didn't. "What's your name?" Brandon asked. "Ethan." "Right, Ethan the janitor." Brandon stepped closer. "Ever been in a real fight?" Something unreadable flickered behind Ethan's eyes. "No," he replied evenly. "A lie 20 years old." Brandon clapped his hands. "Perfect, then this will be educational. I want you to stand right here." He pointed to the mat. "Show them what not to do." The laughter thinned. Uneasy glances passed between students. Ethan hesitated. He thought of his daughter asleep at home. Thought of promises buried under years of silence. "I'm just here to clean," he said. Brandon leaned in, voice dropping. "And I'm just here to teach you your place." That did it. Ethan set the mop down. The sound, plastic handle touching rubber mat, was soft. But the room felt different immediately, like pressure before a storm. He stepped onto the mat, not stiff, not nervous, balanced, too balanced. A brunette student near the back swallowed hard. She didn't know why, but her instincts were screaming. "All right," Ethan said quietly. "One condition." Brandon grinned. "You're in no position to." "When this is over," Ethan continued, eyes steady, "you apologize to your students for turning discipline into humiliation." The room went dead silent. Brandon blinked, then laughed. "You're about to regret opening your mouth." Ethan didn't respond, because the man holding the mop wasn't a janitor. He was a ghost the fighting world had buried, and tonight the silence was about to break. What happens when a man who swore never to fight again is pushed one step too far? Brandon Knox rolled his shoulders like a performer warming up for a spotlight. "All right, everyone," he announced, clapping once. "Circle up. This won't take long." The students obeyed, though the mood had shifted. What moments ago felt like entertainment now felt uncertain. 8 pairs of eyes tracked Ethan Cole as he stood at the center of the mat, hands relaxed at his sides, posture loose but grounded. Too grounded. Brandon noticed it too. He masked his discomfort with a grin and dropped into a fighting stance, textbook sharp. Feet angled, fists raised, chin tucked. He had taught this position hundreds of times. "First lesson," Brandon said loudly, circling Ethan. "Confidence comes from commitment. You hesitate, you lose." Ethan didn't move, not an inch. That bothered Brandon more than he wanted to admit. "You going to guard yourself?" Brandon taunted. "Or do you usually clean floors with your face?" A ripple of laughter tried to form. It died halfway. Ethan's eyes followed Brandon, not his hands, not his feet, but him. The whole body calm, measuring. "Whenever you're ready," Ethan said. The simplicity of it made Brandon's jaw tighten. "Fine." He lunged forward with a quick jab, controlled, fast, meant to stop just short of contact. A warning. But Ethan wasn't there, not by jumping back, not by panicking. He simply wasn't where the fist had been aimed. A quiet shift. A subtle angle change, like stepping out of rain without breaking stride. Brandon frowned and reset. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. He tried again, jab cross, sharper this time. Again nothing. The room grew quiet enough to hear breath. Brandon's punches weren't sloppy. They were good, clean, practiced. Yet each one met empty space, as if Ethan knew where they'd land before Brandon himself did. "What the hell?" someone whispered. Ethan still hadn't raised his hands. A brunette student near the edge, Lena Park, purple belt, felt her pulse quicken. She had watched hundreds of sparring sessions. This wasn't normal. This wasn't defense. It was permission. Brandon felt it now, the space between them shrinking, not physically but psychologically. His confidence began leaking through his breath. "Stop moving," Brandon snapped, frustration breaking through. "Fight." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "I am." That single sentence landed harder than any strike. Brandon rushed in, this time reckless hook, straight, low kick. He needed contact, needed control. He got neither. Ethan flowed around him, never hurried, never rigid, each movement economical, almost lazy but perfectly placed. Brandon's own momentum betrayed him, dragging him forward off balance. Sweat beaded on Brandon's forehead. "How are you doing this?" he demanded. Ethan's voice stayed level. "You're trying to win." "I'm trying to understand." That made no sense, and it terrified Brandon. Lena swallowed. She leaned toward the student beside her. He's not guessing, she whispered. He's reading him. At that moment, Ethan shifted his weight just slightly. The air changed. Brandon felt it before he understood it, a pressure, a warning deep in his gut. Ethan looked at him not with anger, not with pride, but with something heavier. Last chance, Ethan said quietly. Call this off. Brandon's pride flared. He stepped in again. And this time, Ethan moved forward. What happens when the man who hasn't thrown a punch yet finally decides to step in? Brandon stepped in hard, too hard. Years of teaching beginners had trained him to dominate space, to overwhelm before doubt could form. His shoulder dipped, telegraphing the strike, but habit overruled awareness. That was the mistake. Ethan moved, not fast, not slow, precisely. His lead foot slid half a step inward, cutting the angle before Brandon's mind could register the shift. To the students, it looked like Ethan barely moved at all. To Brandon, it felt like the world tilted. His punch sailed past empty air, his balance overcommitted, his center exposed. Panic flared sharp and sudden because in every spar he'd ever won he'd felt control. Now control was gone. Ethan was suddenly close. Close enough for Brandon to see the fine lines at the corner of his eyes. Close enough to hear his breathing steady, unhurried. You're leaning forward, Ethan said quietly as if offering coaching. You do it when you're trying to intimidate. Brandon spun away, heart hammering. Don't talk, he snapped. Just fight. Students backed up instinctively. This wasn't a demo anymore, this was exposure. Brandon attacked again, faster, sloppier. Elbow, hook, knee, everything he had, nothing landed. Ethan slipped, pivoted, redirected, never colliding, never retreating far. He was always there, just outside danger, just inside awareness. Lena Park's hands trembled. She had trained 8 years. She knew what she was seeing now. This wasn't skill. This was memory. Muscle memory burned in by real consequence, not padded mats and controlled rounds. Sensei, someone murmured, voice uncertain. Brandon heard it, so did his ego. He rushed again, shouting, anger fueling speed but killing accuracy. His breathing grew ragged, chest heaving, legs heavy. Ethan stayed calm. You don't need to prove anything, Ethan said. The words hit Brandon harder than a strike. You think you know me? Brandon roared. Ethan didn't answer. He stepped inside Brandon's guard. For the first time, Ethan touched him, 2 fingers. Light placed just above the sternum. There was no shove, no wind-up, no visible force. Yet Brandon's feet left the mat. He flew backward as if pulled by an invisible tide, crashing onto his back with a hollow thud that echoed through the dojo. Silence exploded. No one moved, no one breathed. Brandon stared up at the lights, chest burning, body frozen in disbelief. He wasn't hurt, no sharp pain, no broken bone, just undone. What? His voice cracked. What was that? Ethan stood over him, not looming, not triumphant, just present. Control, Ethan said, without anger. Lena felt her knees weaken. She had studied biomechanics, physics, combat theory. That shouldn't have been possible. Brandon scrambled to sit up, face pale. Who are you? Ethan hesitated. For 20 years he had buried that answer. Changed cities, changed jobs, changed names, but some truths refused to stay buried. Before he could speak, Lena's phone buzzed in her hand. She had searched without realizing she'd done it. And now the screen glowed with a face, older, yes, but unmistakable. Her breath caught. Oh my God, she whispered. Brandon looked at her. What? Lena raised the phone, eyes wide. That's him, she said, voice shaking. Ethan Cole isn't his real name. The room leaned forward as one. His name is Daniel Cross. Brandon's blood ran cold. Lena swallowed. And he's the man the fighting world thought disappeared forever. Why did one of the most feared fighters on the planet vanish? And why did he choose to stay silent until tonight? The dojo didn't erupt. It froze. Lena's phone trembled in her hand as if it weighed more than it should. On the screen, grainy footage, old headlines, a younger man standing inside a cage, sweat-soaked, eyes calm and merciless. Daniel Cross. Brandon pushed himself upright, back scraping the mat. That's not funny, he said, forcing a laugh that cracked halfway through. You made this up. I didn't, Lena whispered. I recognized the stance. She turned the screen so everyone could see. 5-time world champion, undefeated, retired at 28, disappeared overnight. The words hit the room one by one, heavy as stones. Daniel closed his eyes. For a moment, the smell of rubber mats vanished, replaced by bright lights, roaring crowds, and the metallic taste of blood. He hadn't thought of those nights in years, not willingly. I asked you to stop, Daniel said softly. Brandon's mouth opened, closed, his voice came out thin. You're lying. If you were him, why would you be here cleaning floors? Daniel looked at him then, not with superiority. With something closer to grief. Because I didn't trust myself anymore, he said. The students leaned in, even breathing felt too loud. 20 years ago, Daniel continued, I hurt someone I loved, not in a fight, in training. I let my anger steer me. His jaw tightened. He never woke up. Silence pressed down like weight. I walked away the next morning, gave up everything, titles, money, my name, he exhaled slowly. I thought if I lived smaller, I couldn't hurt anyone again. Brandon's bravado collapsed in real time. His shoulders sagged, his eyes dropped. I didn't know, he muttered. Daniel nodded. That's the point. He turned, addressing the room now. Strength doesn't reveal who you are when things are easy, he said. It reveals you when you feel disrespected, when you feel small, when you think power gives you permission. Lena felt her throat tighten. She wasn't taking notes anymore. She was listening. Daniel faced Brandon again. If you'd known who I was, you wouldn't have treated me that way. But what about the next person, the one without a past to protect them? Brandon swallowed hard. I thought respect came from rank, he said quietly. Daniel shook his head. Respect comes from restraint. Brandon lowered himself to his knees, not from pain but from shame. I'm sorry, he said, to you. To them, Daniel didn't answer right away. Then he offered his hand. Brandon took it. The class watched something rare, not a victory but a surrender. Later, as the students filtered out in hushed clusters, Lena lingered. Are you going to disappear again? She asked. Daniel looked around the dojo at the mats, the faces, the silence now filled with something new. No, he said. I think I've been quiet long enough. He glanced at the mop still resting against the wall. Tomorrow, he added, I'll bring something else to class. Lena smiled faintly. A belt? Daniel shook his head. A lesson. What happens when a man who mastered violence chooses to teach restraint and a dojo is forced to change forever? The next evening, Ironclad Martial Arts Academy felt different before anyone spoke a word. Students arrived early, quieter, more alert, no jokes, no music blasting from Brandon's office. Even the mats seemed cleaner, as if the room itself was waiting. Daniel Cross arrived last, not in a janitor's uniform, not in a champion's walkout jacket either. Just plain white training clothes, no belt, no markings, no symbols of rank. Brandon stood near the wall, hands clasped behind his back like a student awaiting inspection. When Daniel entered, Brandon bowed. Deeply, the room stilled. I asked Daniel to lead tonight's class, Brandon said, voice steady but humble. I'll be training with you. A ripple moved through the students, some looked surprised, others relieved. Daniel stepped forward. We're not sparring tonight, he said calmly. We're not drilling combinations. And we're not talking about winning, a few brows furrowed. We're talking about control, Daniel continued. Because power without control ruins lives. I know, I lived it. No one checked their phone, no one shifted impatiently. Pair up, Daniel said. I want you to push your partner. Confusion spread, but they obeyed, gentle shoves at first, awkward laughter. Harder, Daniel instructed. The pushes grew firmer, balance wobbled, feet slid. Now stop, Daniel said. Notice something? He walked between the pairs. The harder you push, the more unstable you become. Power doesn't come from force alone, it comes from alignment. He demonstrated with Brandon. Daniel placed one hand lightly on Brandon's chest. Brandon pushed hard. Daniel didn't resist, he redirected. Brandon stumbled forward, nearly falling. Daniel caught him. You see, Daniel said, aggression creates openings. Calm closes them. Lena felt goosebumps rise along her arms. This wasn't a lecture, it was truth made visible. Daniel had them repeat the exercise, this time focusing on breath, posture, awareness. Slowly, clumsiness turned into understanding. Near the end of class, Daniel addressed them again. Martial arts isn't about who dominates, he said. It's about who protects your partner, yourself. The space around you, he looked directly at Brandon. And leadership, Daniel added, isn't about being feared, it's about being trusted. Brandon nodded, eyes downcast. After class, students lingered. No one rushed out. Lena approached Daniel. Will you keep teaching? Daniel considered the question. For a while, he said, as long as the lessons matter. That night at home, Daniel unlocked a drawer he hadn't opened in years. Inside, an old photograph. Two young men, arms slung over each other, grinning after a hard session. Daniel touched the edge of the photo. I'm trying, he whispered. And for the first time in 2 decades, the silence inside him answered back, not with guilt but with peace. But when the past finally loosens its grip, is it ready to stay buried, or will it demand one final reckoning? It didn't take long for the outside world to notice. 3 days after Daniel Cross led his first class, a shaky video began circulating online. Someone no one ever admitted who had filmed the moment Brandon Knox was sent flying by a touch that barely looked like contact. The caption read, Janitor humbles black belt instructor. By the end of the week, it had 1 million views. Daniel didn't own a smartphone. He found out the old-fashioned way by the way people looked at him when he walked into the dojo. Some stared in awe, some in disbelief. A few with something sharper, expectation. The parking lot filled earlier than usual that evening. New faces, curious faces. People who didn't bow, didn't listen, didn't come to learn, they came to see a legend. Daniel felt it the moment he stepped onto the mat. This isn't a show, he said calmly. If that's what you're here for, you're in the wrong place. A man near the wall scoffed. Come on, champ, just one demo. Brandon stiffened, ready to intervene, but Daniel raised a hand. No, Daniel said. Not angry, final, the room quieted. Martial arts isn't spectacle, Daniel continued. It's responsibility. If you're here to test me, you already failed. A few people left, disappointed. The ones who stayed sat down. That night, Daniel noticed Brandon struggling, not physically, but internally. He moved like a man relearning his own body, careful, humble, attentive in a way he'd never been before. After class, Brandon stayed behind. I lost half my ego in one night, he said quietly, and somehow I feel lighter. Daniel nodded. That's what happens when you stop carrying what doesn't serve you. Brandon hesitated. I don't deserve to lead this place anymore. Daniel studied him. Leadership isn't about what you deserve, it's about what you choose to become next. The following week, a letter arrived, official, heavy paper. A promotion logo Daniel recognized instantly. An invitation. A global fight organization wanted him back. Exhibition match, no title, massive payday. Brandon watched Daniel read it. What are you going to do? Brandon asked. Daniel folded the letter carefully. Nothing. Brandon blinked. Nothing. I didn't walk away because I was afraid to lose, Daniel said. I walked away because I was afraid of who I became when I won. That night, Daniel stood alone in the empty dojo, lights dimmed. The mat smelled faintly of sweat and effort. He knelt and touched the floor. I'm doing it differently this time, he said aloud to no one and everyone. At home, his daughter Maya looked up from her homework. Dad, she asked, why do people keep calling you a champion? Daniel smiled gently. Because once I forgot what really mattered. Maya tilted her head. And now, Daniel said, I remember. But when fame resurfaces and old ghosts come calling, can a man truly choose peace or will the past demand payment? The call came on a Tuesday morning. Daniel was fixing a loose cabinet hinge in a neighbor's kitchen when his old flip phone buzzed in his pocket. He almost ignored it. Almost. Daniel Cross, the voice on the other end said smoothly. This is Victor Hale from Apex Combat League. Daniel closed his eyes. 20 years vanished in a breath. We'd like to make something special happen, Victor continued. One night, one exhibition, no belts, no rankings. Just history. Daniel leaned against the counter, steadying himself. I said no already, Daniel replied. Victor chuckled. You said no to fighting. This isn't that. This is closure. Fans want to see you. Fighters want to test themselves against you. Silence stretched. And Victor added, lowering his voice, we can honor your friend, dedicate the night to him. That one landed. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. Images flashed, sweat, laughter, the sound of gloves hitting pads, then the awful stillness afterward. I don't need a cage to remember him, Daniel said. Victor sighed. Think about it. Sometimes walking away isn't peace. Sometimes it's unfinished business. The line went dead. That evening, Daniel didn't teach. He sat on the edge of the mat long after the students left, staring at nothing. Brandon noticed but didn't interrupt. Some battles weren't meant for witnesses. Later that night, Daniel stood at the window of his apartment, city lights blurring in the rain. What if he was wrong? What if avoiding the ring hadn't been control, but fear disguised as restraint? A soft knock came from the hallway. Lena. I didn't mean to pry, she said carefully, but people are talking about a comeback. Daniel gave a tired smile. People always talk. But what do you want? She asked. Daniel thought of Maya asleep in her room. Thought of the students who trusted him, thought of the man he used to be and the man he was still becoming. I want to be useful, he said. Not admired. Lena nodded. Then whatever you choose, make sure it teaches something. 2 days later, Daniel visited a place he hadn't in years. A small cemetery outside the city, rain-soaked grass, one simple headstone. He knelt. They found me again, Daniel said quietly, and I don't know if refusing is strength or just hiding. The wind moved through the trees, gentle but insistent. Daniel breathed out slowly. I won't fight for applause, he said. But if I step back in, it'll be for the right reason. When he stood, his decision wasn't final, but it was forming. Back at the dojo, Brandon gathered the students. Whatever happens, Brandon said, this place stays what it's become. Daniel overheard from the doorway, and for the first time since his name resurfaced, he felt something solid beneath the doubt. Not obligation, purpose. If returning to the ring could teach the world one final lesson, would refusing mean abandoning it? Daniel made his decision quietly. No announcement, no social media post, no dramatic speech. He mailed a single envelope to Apex Combat League. Inside, a handwritten note. I won't fight for spectacle, but I will step onto a mat on my terms. 2 weeks later, Apex announced a special event, not a cage match. Not a title night, a public seminar. No tickets sold, no pay-per-view, free entry. The headline stunned everyone. Daniel Cross returns not to fight but to teach. The arena still filled. Fighters, coaches, reporters, skeptics. People expecting either dominance or disappointment. Daniel walked out wearing plain white training clothes. No music, no lights, just silence. Victor Hale approached him backstage, confused. You could have sold out this building 10 times over. Daniel met his eyes. Then they'd come for blood, not understanding. Out on the mat, Daniel faced the crowd. I won't be fighting tonight, he said into the microphone. But I will be answering a question people keep asking. The crowd leaned in. What makes someone dangerous? He gestured to a young fighter who stepped forward, talented, fast, hungry. Attack me, Daniel instructed. The fighter hesitated, full speed. Yes, Daniel said, but with control. The exchange lasted seconds. Daniel never struck. He redirected, off-balanced, neutralized. The fighter ended seated on the mat, unharmed, stunned. Power, Daniel said, turning to the audience, is the ability to hurt. Control is the ability to stop. He repeated the exercise with 3 more fighters. Same result. No bruises, no knockouts, just understanding. Cameras caught faces changing, confusion giving way to awe. Daniel finished with one final demonstration. He placed his palm against a heavy bag, barely touching. The bag swung back violently. Gasps rippled through the crowd. That force, Daniel said calmly, is available to anyone who trains alignment, patience, and restraint, but without character it destroys. He bowed. No applause followed at first. Then one clap, then another. Soon the arena filled with something louder than cheers. Respect. That night Daniel returned home. Maya waited up. Did you win? She asked. Daniel smiled and sat beside her. I think so. She hugged him tightly. Back in Tacoma, Ironclad Academy saw a surge, but Daniel set rules. No idolizing, no shortcuts. No ego. Those who stayed, stayed for the right reasons. Brandon watched Daniel teach one evening and realized something profound. The man who could end fights chose to end ignorance instead. And that was far more powerful. But peace has a cost, and the world isn't done testing whether Daniel Cross truly walked away from violence forever. It happened on a rainy Friday night. Daniel was closing the dojo with Brandon when the shouting started outside, angry, slurred voices echoing off the alley walls. Daniel's body reacted before his mind did. His shoulders squared. His breathing slowed, old instincts. 3 men stumbled into the parking lot, drunk and loud, knocking over a trash bin. One of them recognized the sign above the door. Hey, he laughed. That place with the fake legend? Brandon stiffened. Ignore them. But one man stepped closer, eyes glassy. You Cross, the guy who wouldn't fight. Daniel stepped outside calmly, pulling the door shut behind him so the students inside wouldn't see. I don't want trouble, Daniel said. The man shoved him in the chest. Hard, the shove echoed in Daniel's bones, not from pain but from memory. For a split second the world narrowed to distance, angle, timing. He could end it in less than a breath. He didn't move. I said back off, the man snarled, raising a fist. Daniel felt at the edge where restraint ends and damage begins. He lifted his hands, open palms. You're angry, he said. But this isn't what you want. The fist froze midair. Something in Daniel's voice cut through the haze. The man's friends pulled him back, muttering. They stumbled away, insults trailing behind them like smoke. Daniel exhaled only when they were gone. Inside, Brandon stared at him. You could have. I know, Daniel said quietly. That night, Daniel sat alone in the dojo, lights off, rain tapping the windows. He realized then that control wasn't a single choice, it was a daily one. The next week, Daniel gathered the class. I want to talk about fear, he said. Not fear of losing, fear of hurting others. He told them everything, the full truth. The accident, the years of hiding, the moment in the parking lot. I didn't walk away because I was weak, Daniel said. I walked away because I understood how strong I was. The room was silent. Lena raised her hand. Does it ever go away? Daniel shook his head. No, you just get better at carrying it. After class, Maya waited for him at the edge of the mat. Dad, she asked, are you scared? Daniel knelt. Sometimes. But you didn't hurt that man, she said. No, Daniel replied. Maya smiled softly. Then you're still winning. Daniel hugged her, feeling the truth settle deep. Across the city, Victor Hale watched the seminar footage again. No punches, no violence, just mastery. He smiled to himself. He really changed, he murmured, but the world wasn't done learning that lesson yet. When the ultimate challenge comes not in a ring but in real life, will control still be enough? The letter arrived without warning. No logo, no return address. Just Daniel's name written carefully on the front. He opened it alone in the dojo office, the quiet hum of fluorescent lights filling the space. My son trains with you. He used to get into fights, a lot of them. Last week he walked away from one. He said you taught him that winning doesn't always look like standing over someone. Thank you. Daniel sat back slowly. For years he had measured damage by what he had broken. Now he was learning to measure impact by what didn't happen. That evening he gathered the class earlier than usual. We're going to change something, Daniel said. From now on, no one here trains to be feared. A few students exchanged looks. You train to be reliable, he continued. The person others feel safer standing next to. Brandon nodded, understanding fully. Weeks passed. Then months. Ironclad Academy became known for something unusual, not champions, not knockouts, but calm. Schools sent troubled teens. Parents stayed to watch quietly from the back. Arguments dissolved before they escalated. One afternoon, a boy named Eli, 14, thin and angry, refused to spar. They say fighting solves things, Eli muttered. Daniel sat beside him. Fighting solves moments, control solves lives. Eli looked up. How do you know? Daniel smiled faintly. Because I've tried both. That night, Daniel visited the cemetery again. I didn't come back to fight, he said softly to the stone. I came back to finish the lesson. The wind moved through the grass, not heavy, not dramatic, enough. Months later, Apex Combat League released a statement. Daniel Cross officially declines all future fight offers. The internet buzzed briefly, then moved on, but something quieter stayed behind. At Ironclad, a new plaque was mounted near the entrance. Not a title, not a trophy, just words, strength is what you do when no one is forcing your hand. Maya read it every time she came in. Dad, she said one evening, I think people needed you more like this. Daniel nodded. So did I. As he locked up for the night, Daniel realized something that surprised him. He wasn't running anymore, he wasn't hiding. He had simply chosen where his strength belonged. But when a man redefines strength, his legacy must be tested one last time, not by violence but by truth. The invitation didn't come from a fight promotion this time. It came from a high school, a public one just outside Tacoma, fights in the hallways, teachers overwhelmed, parents exhausted. The principal's email was simple. We don't need a champion, we need someone they'll listen to. Daniel stood in the school gym a week later, facing nearly 300 teenagers slouched on metal bleachers. Some laughed, some scrolled on phones. A few stared at him with open challenge. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't tell them who he used to be. He asked one question. Who here thinks respect comes from fear? Hands went up. Too many. Daniel nodded. That's what I thought too. The gym quieted a little. I spent half my life believing that if people feared me I was safe, powerful, untouchable. He paused. I was wrong. Someone scoffed. Daniel ignored it. I lost my best friend because I didn't know how to stop, he said. Not stop fighting, stop myself. Now the gym was silent. I won every match, Daniel continued, and still ruined my life. Because nobody taught me that strength without control isn't strength at all. A boy in the front row frowned. So what, just let people walk over you? Daniel shook his head. No, you stand your ground. But you don't let anger decide for you. He stepped down onto the gym floor. Real power is knowing you can hurt someone and choosing not to. By the end of the hour, no one was laughing. Afterward, a teacher pulled Daniel aside. They've never listened like that, Daniel smiled faintly. I wasn't talking at them, I was confessing. That night back at the dojo, Brandon handed Daniel a folder. What's this? Daniel asked. Paperwork, Brandon said. Transfer of ownership, Daniel stared. I never asked for this. I know, Brandon replied, that's why you should have it. Daniel didn't answer right away. Later, he sat with Maya on the mat, watching beginners struggle through balance drills. Dad, she asked quietly, do you ever wish people remembered you for winning? Daniel looked around the room at effort, patience, growth. No, he said, I hope they remember me for helping. Maya smiled. Then you're doing it right, Daniel exhaled slowly. For the first time in his life, he felt aligned not with who he was but with who he chose to be every day. But when the past is finally faced, there's one last truth that must be spoken out loud. Daniel had avoided interviews for months, not because he feared the questions, but because he feared the silence after answering them. Yet when the local public radio station reached out, he said yes. No cameras, no crowd. Just microphones and honesty. The host didn't start with his career. She asked, what made you disappear? Daniel took a breath. For a long time, he said, I thought silence was accountability. That if I removed myself, I was making things right. He paused. I was wrong. The studio was quiet. Silence can be avoidance, Daniel continued. Owning the truth means saying it out loud without excuses. For the first time publicly, Daniel told the story without edits. No softened language, no heroic framing. I lost control, he said plainly. And someone I loved paid for it. I didn't lose him to the sport. I lost him to my inability to manage my own anger. Listeners called in. Not to accuse, to thank him. One message stood out. My brother died in a street fight. Hearing you take responsibility helped me understand that anger isn't fate, it's a choice. Daniel sat back shaken. That night he gathered the dojo. I need to tell you something, he said. Not as your teacher, as a man. They listened as he spoke the words he'd carried alone for 2 decades. I was wrong, and I ran. Teaching you is my way of making sure my failure has meaning. No one interrupted. When he finished, Brandon bowed deep and sincere. So do we, Brandon said. Weeks later, a memorial scholarship was announced. The Cross Hale Fund for young athletes learning conflict resolution through martial arts. Daniel didn't attend the ceremony. He watched from the back. Legacy, he realized, didn't need applause. One evening, Maya brought home a school assignment. Who is your hero and why? She handed him the paper. Daniel read quietly, my dad. Because he knows how strong he is and chooses to be kind anyway. Daniel closed his eyes. The weight finally lifted, not erased but carried correctly. When a life once defined by violence becomes a lesson in restraint, what remains is not regret but purpose. The dojo was louder than it had ever been, not with chaos but with life. 32 students now filled Ironclad Academy each evening. Different ages, different backgrounds, different reasons for walking through the door. Some came angry. Some afraid, some simply lost. Daniel treated them all the same, no favoritism, no stories about his past unless asked directly, no talk of championships, only questions. Why did you react that way? What were you protecting? Who were you trying to prove something to? Those questions unsettled people far more than drills ever had. One evening, a young man named Marcus stormed out mid-class after being corrected. He slammed his gloves into a locker, breathing hard. Daniel followed, not rushing. Talk to me, Daniel said. Marcus shook his head. I hate feeling weak. Daniel nodded. So did I. Marcus looked up. You, Daniel met his eyes. Especially me. They sat on the bench in silence before Marcus finally asked, how did you stop? Daniel answered honestly. I didn't stop feeling weak. I stopped letting it decide my actions. The next day, Marcus came back early. Not to fight, to learn. Across the city, the scholarship fund began changing lives quietly. Teens who had never stepped into a gym learned balance before aggression, breath before reaction, choice before impulse. Daniel watched from a distance. One afternoon, Brandon approached him holding a flyer. They want to name the academy after you, Brandon said. Daniel shook his head immediately. No, why not? Because this place isn't about me, Daniel replied. It's about what happens when people take responsibility for who they become. That evening, Daniel stood alone in the dojo after everyone left. He looked at the worn mats, the scuffed walls, the quiet. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he owed the past anything more. At home, Maya practiced her homework presentation in the living room. It's about conflict resolution, she explained. I used you as an example, Daniel smiled. That's brave. So were you, she said. Daniel realized then that legacy isn't what people say about you later. It's what your presence makes possible now. But before the story ends, there is one final place Daniel must return to make peace not with the world but with himself. Daniel hadn't been back there in 20 years. The old training hall sat on the edge of town, half forgotten, its brick walls weathered and quiet. The sign above the door was faded, letters peeling, but Daniel recognized it instantly. This was where everything had ended. He stood outside longer than he meant to, hands in his pockets, breathing slow. The past pressed in not violently but insistently. Inside, the lights were dim. The mats had been replaced, the mirrors were new, but the air felt the same. A younger coach looked up from the desk. Can I help you? Daniel nodded. I trained here once a long time ago. The coach studied him, then smiled faintly. You're Daniel Cross. Daniel blinked. You know me? Everyone does, the coach replied, but not for the reason you think. He gestured to the wall. There, among old photos and plaques, was a single frame Daniel had never seen before, not a championship, not a victory. A dedication. In memory of Aaron Hale, a fighter who believed discipline mattered more than fame. Daniel's chest tightened. I asked them to put that up, the coach said gently. Your friend's family. They said you changed the way people talked about responsibility in the sport. Daniel felt his knees weaken. He sat. I didn't come back because I was ashamed, he admitted. I thought facing this place meant reopening wounds. The coach shook his head. Sometimes wounds close only when you stop avoiding them. Daniel stood slowly and bowed not to the room but to the memory it held. I'm sorry, he whispered. And thank you. Outside, the sky had cleared. That night, Daniel returned home lighter than he'd felt in decades. He found Meyer at the table drawing. What's that? He asked. A timeline, she said. About how people change. Daniel smiled. That's a good subject. She looked up. Dad, are you done running now? Daniel considered the question carefully. Yes, he said, I think I am. Maya hugged him without another word. For the first time, Daniel slept without dreams of the past pulling him under. With peace finally made, what remains for a man once defined by violence? When the story reaches its final page, the anniversary came quietly. No ceremony. No announcement. Daniel didn't mark it on a calendar, but his body remembered. 21 years since the night that split his life in two. 21 years since anger had outrun judgment. He opened the dojo early that morning. Students arrived one by one, some stretching, some talking softly, some simply sitting on the mat in silence. No one knew why Daniel had asked them to come before class. When everyone was present, Daniel stood in the center. I want to leave you with something, he said. Not a technique, not a rule. He paused, letting the room settle. A question. They leaned in. When you're tested, really tested, who do you want to be? No one answered. Daniel nodded. That question matters more than how hard you hit, how fast you move, or how many fights you win. He walked slowly, meeting their eyes. I used to think strength was domination, then I thought it was avoidance. Both were wrong. He stopped beside Brandon. Strength, Daniel said, is responsibility. He gestured toward Lena, then the younger students. It's knowing the weight of your actions before you act. It's choosing restraint when ego demands release. It's standing firm without needing to destroy what stands in front of you. Silence filled the dojo, not empty but full. Daniel took a breath. I can't undo the harm I caused, he said. But I can live in a way that prevents more harm from happening. He bowed, not as a master, as a man. After class, no one rushed out. They stayed, helping clean mats, asking quiet questions, sharing pieces of themselves they hadn't shared before. Daniel watched it unfold and realized something simple and profound. This was the victory he'd never known how to chase. That evening, Daniel and Maya walked home together. Dad, she said, do you think people change for good? Daniel thought about the question carefully. I think people change when they stop lying to themselves, he said. She smiled. Then you changed. Daniel laughed softly. I hope so. As they reached their door, Daniel looked back once at the street, the city, the life he'd built from restraint instead of rage. He felt no urge to prove anything, no hunger for recognition, just gratitude. Because true strength, he had learned, doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly in patience and accountability and in the courage to choose better every single day. You don't need to win to be strong. You need to know when not to fight. 1 year later, Ironclad Martial Arts Academy didn't look like a place that produced legends. There were no banners listing champions, no framed belts, no photos of knockouts, just a simple sign near the entrance, train to protect. Train to choose. On a Tuesday evening, Daniel Cross stood near the wall, watching a new group of students struggle through balance drills. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct immediately, he observed. Because teaching, he had learned, was mostly about listening. Brandon moved among the students now, not barking orders, not performing, but guiding. When someone made a mistake, he corrected it quietly. When someone grew frustrated, he knelt beside them. The change wasn't dramatic, it was real. In the corner, Lena helped a younger student regulate their breathing after a panic spike. Maya sat at the front desk doing homework, occasionally looking up to watch her father with quiet pride. Daniel felt something settle in his chest. This was the life he'd chosen. Later that night, after the dojo emptied, Daniel locked up and walked home under soft streetlights. His phone buzzed once, a message from a number he didn't recognize. My son used to fight everyone, now he talks things through. He says strength is choosing what happens next. Thank you. Daniel didn't reply, he didn't need to. At home, he placed the phone down and sat with Maya on the couch. Dad, she asked, do you ever miss the old days? Daniel thought about crowds screaming his name, about the rush, about the danger. No, he said honestly, I miss who I could have been back then. But I'm glad I became who I am now, she nodded, satisfied. Before bed, Daniel opened the drawer one last time. Inside lay the photograph, two young men smiling, arms slung over each other. Daniel held it gently. I didn't waste it, he said softly. I finally understood it. The next morning, a new student walked into Ironclad Academy, shy, nervous, shoulders tight with fear. Daniel greeted him with the same calm presence he gave everyone. You don't have to prove anything here, Daniel said. You just have to learn. The student nodded, relieved. And just like that, the lesson continued, quietly spreading, one person at a time, because real strength doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shout, it doesn't humiliate, it protects, it teaches. It changes lives without asking for credit. And the man once known for violence became known for something far rarer, wisdom earned the hard way. Strength isn't about how hard you hit, it's about how much damage you choose not to cause. And the bravest fight of all is the one you walk away from better than you arrived.